Hi, I'm Nic Bennett, and I'm going to be chatting about our paper that's titled Science Communication Spaces as Pockets of Belonging, Inviting in Plurality of Science Identities for Scientists in Training. This was published in Science Communication. I published it with my co-authors, Anthony Dudo and John Besley, and we were funded by the Rita Allen Foundation. So we were noticing that so many early career scientists, we're thinking maybe graduate students, they seem to be doing science communication, even though they're not being rewarded for it. Why is this happening? So we thought we should ask them. And so we did an interview-based study, and we asked them, why did they do science communication? Where are the areas in their life where they can feel like they belong, like they can be their full selves? And we found that many of them do science communication because it can be a place where they get to be their full selves. Unfortunately, they found that their academic spaces were not usually places they could be their full selves. And so how we did this paper, we talked to 24 STEM graduate students. We had people from all over the US and Canada and currently enrolled in those universities. So they didn't need to be from the US and Canada, they just needed to be currently attending. And they needed to have some science communication experience. We did an interview with them, and then we looked at these interviews for themes having to do with something called science identity. So science identity is this idea of thinking of, am I a science person? Am I competent? Do I get to perform that competence? Do other people see that I'm a science person? And so what did we find? We found that about half of the participants, about 12 of them, fell more into what we would call a research science identity. They love science for science's sake. They really identify as a science person, and they love the research part. They felt that they belonged both in academia and in science communication. And then the other half had what we call an altruistic science identity, meaning they love science, but they're really excited about what science can do to help make the world better. They wanted to bring science back to their communities. They saw science as this kind of force for going out into the world and doing good things. We did have one who had what we call what previous people have called a disrupted science identity, which means they didn't feel like a science person. One of the really interesting pieces that we found was that those students were talking about the ways relationships really made a difference. So having someone else see you as a science person is really, really important. There's really an amazing relational aspect that's happening here that helps people feel like they can be their full selves and that they can belong. One exception that we find, unfortunately, some of the folks who had more visible presences, like someone had a very popular Instagram account, there's a danger there of receiving harassment online, and then you don't feel like you belong. So there's something about these highly visible spaces that we also need to think about. And so our results are suggesting that in science communication spaces, there's a plurality of ways you can be. There's multiple ways you can be. And when you feel like you are not someone who belongs in science, and this stereotypical idea of a science person as a white cis male who maybe has some money, this widens that and welcomes in more people who think of science in different ways. And so this research shows that academic spaces are still not great places. It's a hostile place to welcome people into. So only thinking about diversity is not helpful, but maybe there's something interesting happening here in these science communication spaces that especially has to do with these relationships we build. We may also want to think about how often research is given more power than communication. So if these spaces where we are feeling more belonging are undervalued in comparison, that needs to change as well. And so there's this longer term systems level change that needs to happen in thinking about how we can make spaces where people feel they can be their full multiple selves and all of their different science identities and feel like science is a place that's for them.